Welcome to All Things Moore County, Moore County's weekly radio show, highlighting the many facets of the Sandhills. That includes real estate, lifestyles, community, and neighborhood. And now, from Four Properties, here's your host, Bill Sahadi.
Our house in the middle of our street.
Good morning. Welcome to the talk show, All Things Moore County. We are winding down in April, and we're a week away from the very well-known Springfest in Southern Pines. And all around Moore County, these last couple of years, we've had a resurgence of and a rediscovery of some of the historic entities that surround us, and with so many new people moving into Moore County and the changing demographics, it's a privilege to be able to talk about some of the institutions and some of the organizations that people who move here might not have had any clue about, but it's such a wonderful thing to discover. And Dorothy, one of the things we always say about this area is so many people who move here from the Midwest, the metropolitan New York, New England area. This area reminds people of the towns that they grew up in as kids. And probably one of the best kept secrets of Moore County is the topic of our conversation today, and that is the Malcolm Blue Farm in Aberdeen. Lots of people are familiar with it, but I think just as many people are not. And we have a great panel of guests today to talk about Malcolm Blue Farm, what it is, what it isn't. It is a historic home and farm near Aberdeen. The house was believed to be dated at 1825, and it's a one-story, three-bay frame structure. But it's an area, I think it's 7.5 acres. It's a way to walk back into yesteryear, into time, and to trace some of the roots. A couple of years ago, we had David Woodruff on the show. And David wrote a book called Taproots. And no one understood what the term taproots meant, but today I think our panel, and I'm going to introduce everybody, will be able to explain exactly what it was. And we were glad to have David on. My guests today are Kelly Hinson, who is the past president of the Moore County Historical Society, Linda Jarrett, who is one of the leaders of the Friends of the Malcolm Blue Farm, and Linda, I understand that your maiden name is Blue.
That's correct.
We're going to get into that today. That's just not a coincidence. There's a gentleman here from Brooklyn, New York, I have to say, and I quickly, the minute he said hello to me, I said, "Where are you from?" And we're actually from the same neck of the woods. Wyckoff, but Bob Martin is who I'm talking about. Good morning, Bob.
Yeah, born in Wyckoff Heights in Brooklyn. As a young child, moved 60 miles east to Long Island to a small fishing village.
Yeah.
And yes, we all sound like this.
But you're from the southern part of Long Island, so it's okay. You can remain here
yes.
in the south.
I'm allowed.
Okay. Kelly, I want to say good morning to you.
Good morning.
And thank you also for organizing this show. There's a lot that you all want to speak about the Malcolm Blue Farm, not just some events that are coming up shortly, but the history of the farm,
right,
and the placement. And you've been a historical buff.
Oh, yes.
You're from Moore County?
I am native, and my family has been here for 216 years.
Is that right?
Yes.
May I ask, what's your maiden name?
My maiden name was Atkins.
Okay.
But my roots are Thomas in Jackson Springs. My mother was a Thomas, right.
All right. And our fifth guest is Tom Steeves, who is a member of, and we're going to talk about this, the Tar Heel Boys and Linda. So I thought the Tar Heels were just the University of North Carolina sports teams.
Okay.
Let's talk about Tar Heels. For people who don't know, what is a Tar Heel? Where does that name come from? Tom?
The name originated from the first industry that in North Carolina before it actually was a state. The tar makers that were making tar out of longleaf pine, lighter wood. And that's how the name originated, probably back in the early 1700s.
Okay.
So it didn't have anything to do with the basketball team.
So the TAR, you have an event coming up also at the Malcolm Blue Farm next Saturday, April the 30th. It's called the Tar Pitch and Turpentine for the entire world. Bob, can you tell me a little bit about it?
Well, it's a wonderful event. It's free. One of my favorite words, free.
Yeah.
And it'll be Saturday, April 30th from 10 to 2. There'll be refreshments at a concession stand and vendors brought in. But the event is free. Bring your own chair. And it's a wonderful demonstration on how to make naval stores, particularly tar and pitch. And Mr. Steve will expand on that more. It's his expert area. Would you like to take over?
And this is going to be at the Malcolm Blue Farm?
It will be at Malcolm Blue Farm, and there'll be tours available of the museum and the grounds as well. It's a floating event, so there won't be a certain time that anyone has to be there. You can arrive at any time between 10 and 2 and still see the entire show.
It reminds me of Williamsburg. People can go on different tours to see recreations of periods in our history.
It's my understanding that the demonstrations are going to be repeated approximately hourly.
Oh, okay.
So for the 4-hour time of the event, that gives people 4 opportunities. If they happen to arrive not at the beginning, they can go get something to eat. They can take a tour through the museum and the grounds. I mean, there'll be other things that they can do until the next demonstration starts.
Sounds like it will be a great event for kids, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kids are usually fascinated, and they don't even realize they're absorbing history, which is what I think is wonderful.
Right. Tell me a little bit about the history, if you could. Speak about the history of the Malcolm Blue Farm from step 1, page 1, right on through.
Thank you, Bill.
Bob?
The Malcolm Blue Farm came into being roughly in 1973. It was a standalone home from Malcolm Blue, and I'll explain who he was shortly.
Yeah.
But it was a standalone home. The house itself was built in 1825, and it was actually donated to the Malcolm Blue Historical Society. The society was a group of local people, mostly wives, who got together and said, we need to save this farm. It's one of the oldest buildings in all of Moore County. It needs to be saved. At the time, they were going to bulldoze it all down and put in condos. Mm-hmm. So little by little, the society fixed up the house, started buying more land. It's now up to 7.5 acres. It's a wonderful, quiet place with a flock of chickens and some other animals running around. A 2-story museum. Mm-hmm. All right. There are a number of buildings on the property. There's a tool barn, animal barn, corn crib, and a pack house, and a working grist mill, all dating to 1925. The buildings do need some work, all right, but fortunately the town is recently taking over the farm, and they've done a wonderful job of fixing things and getting things back on track. I've actually got water for the chickens now. It's wonderful.
Is that right?
A little aside, we had a show a couple of years ago, and one of the local kids from the Boys and Girls Club came up to me, and he walks over, he's pulling on my sleeve, and he says, Mr. Martin, he says, there's something wrong with your eggs. Oh. I'm going, something wrong with my eggs? What do you mean? He says, they're all brown.
Oh, gosh.
And it's amazing how people have never seen a brown egg. I just dealt with a young lady from up north, and I handed her some eggs from the farm. Mm-hmm. And she says, well, I'm 67 years old, and I've never eaten a brown egg.
Wow.
She's a convert now.
I find it funny that he refers to people from up north like they're diseased, perplexed, or they're just misguided, and they need to be straightened out. And you are from Brooklyn.
Definitely. Audience, how you doing? Just to get that out. The farm is a wonderful, peaceful place. There's a 2-story historical museum that very few people know about, and it depicts farm life in the 1800s on how pine and pitch were made, how we used the kudzu plant actually for food for not only our animals but ourselves.
The kudzu?
For Southerners, that's kudzu.
Kudzu. Right. How do you pronounce it correctly?
Kudzu.
Kudzu. Okay,
Yes,
I mispronounced it. I just said kudzu. Okay.
Tools is just some military memorabilia, a small store up there, how it was in the 1800s. Very wonderful place. I do tours all the time, and it's my favorite place to hang out. The house itself has been completely remodeled on the inside, and it's furnished with furniture dating back to the Civil War. Not necessarily original to the house, but for the time period.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a beautiful place. In fact, Kelly gave a reading a couple of years ago from Thomas Jackson letters, and it was the perfect setting. She had one oil lamp lit, and she sat there. We sat with a group of people in the dark as she did the letters, and this old man shed a tear or two at the end. It was so well done. I was really impressed.
Thank you.
Okay. The Society's goal was to preserve rural America in Moore County in the 1800s. It was disappearing. As Bill likes to tease me, we were from up north, and where I grew up, we had farms like that, and they've all been bulldozed.
Yeah.
They've all gone. And my thing when I moved down here was to not let that happen here. We need to save it. So the Society decided to preserve the farm, teach children about farm skills and what happened. All right, and did a pretty good job through about 3 years ago. All right, and well, as often happens, they just ran out of volunteers.
Huh.
So they turned the farm over to the town, which really helped out because all the financial worries were gone, like spending $250 a month to mow the lawn. We didn't have that. The town takes care of it. So the town of Aberdeen has done wonders for us. Repaired a lot of equipment, got the buildings back in shape. In fact, they're putting a new roof on the front of the house because it's kind of rotted through a little bit, so that they've got that in the works now. They're going to take down a bunch of trees that are ready to fall down anyway. But so it's a wonderful place, and it's on the National Historic Registry. It's on the North Carolina and National
Civil War
Trail. Thank you. Lost the word for a minute. All right. There's a concession stand. There's restrooms. Like I said, 7.5 acres. It's a beautiful place. I'm there every day. I'm on the town website. You can look for me. I'm Bob Martin, and call me up, and I'll show up for a tour.
Kelly.
As a Civil War buff myself, I have to make sure that everyone knows about the farm's significance during the war and to Moore County history. When Sherman's troops were coming through the night before the Battle of Monroe's Crossroads, the farm and Bethesda Church, which is the neighboring property, were occupied by a contingent of Sherman's troops, and it was apparently raining that night, and they slept under the church and under the house, so the buildings weren't enclosed at the time, and so everywhere were soldiers and trying to take shelter from the rain.
Right.
Apparently they had 300 Confederate prisoners with them. So every time that we do a small reenactment or living history there, we try to involve some of the reenactors of the time period. And future plans are for another reenactment there.
Historically, every year
Linda.
at Farm Skills Festival, we were lucky enough or fortunate enough to recruit an active reenacting group that came with horses and cannon and lived on the site the way they would have camped out at the time, at the time period.
Right.
Fascinated everybody, but especially children, which was the group we're trying to focus on, even though we were very welcoming of all ages of children who want to learn.
As you're all speaking, I have these pictures of these kids who are addicted to video games, texting, and they have to walk onto the farm and sort of lose their cell phone and get away from their electronic world, and it almost becomes a much more interactive experience.
Right.
I would think.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And the tar and turpentine demonstration
Yeah.
is very much that,
Yeah.
coming up on April 30th. Even at the end, the children get to take home a little rosin teddy bear, and they've seen the process all the way from the beginning of resin coming from the tree to the point of making rosin and pouring it into a little form,
Right.
and it's setting up and getting hard until it is a little teddy bear for them to take.
The mothers and grandmothers would would be happy to know you're not really going to give them resin because they
No.
know it'll be all over their house and their cars.
And truthfully, do you want to tell about that, Tom?
Tom?
That when they put it in their pocket, it will melt. Or if you put it in your car and it gets hot, it will definitely cause a sticky mess.
Is that right?
Well, that's one of the things that we go through in our demonstrations is explaining the difference between resin and how it becomes rosin. Of course, it's different from the tar making process. Tar making is done with lightard, which is resinous heartwood of in this area the longleaf pine, and that's another thing we go into in detail is the history of the North Carolina and the longleaf pine, which is all but disappeared in most of the sandhills where it used to be the prevalent tree. But resin and rosin are often confused, and of course rosin is the substance that's the byproduct of the distillation of turpentine from resin, and the rosin that Kelly was talking about, although it forms a little hard teddy bear, the same rosin that you use to rosin up your fiddle strings with, if left on the dashboard of your car, it will melt and create a sticky mess. So we always warn parents
nightmare.
To don't let your children put it anywhere where it's going to melt.
There is an event next Saturday, April the 30th, at the Malcolm Blue farm, at the house and the farm at 1177 Bethesda Road in Aberdeen. The event is free. There'll be concession stands, there'll be lunch, there'll be demonstrations. It's going to run from 10 to 2, and Linda, you said there'll be hourly demonstrations.
My understanding would be approximately, that interval, so that people wouldn't have to worry about being there at a certain time and having missed anything.
Okay.
And there'll be other things they can do if they don't come right at the beginning of a particular demonstration, in that the museum with Bob in charge will be open.
Right.
And then there'll be things to eat.
Wonderful. And people can go on Facebook as well.
Yes.
To look at the event and get information. In the next set, we're going to be speaking, I guess, with Brian Avery. Can you let me know? We're going to call him. Give me a little background on who Brian is.
Brian is an amateur historian and a novelist. He's also a Civil War reenactor, and he was got interested in the tar, pitch, and turpentine making because of a historical series of videos he was making for YouTube called Rivertown. He is a descendant of Rivertown, which was the nickname for Aversboro in Harnett County.
Okay.
And he wanted to build a set on the Sandhills Farm Park, which is in Lillington, to film an episode of his documentary. And that's how I got to know Brian. I'm a member of the Sandhills Farm Club, and
great. We're going to come back in the second set, and we're going to speak to Brian, and we're going to also talk about the push and the tug in Moore County about preserving against a background of a lot of our landscape being changed here in Moore County, and that's a bigger conversation to have. This is All Things Moore County.
In the middle of our street, our house. In the middle of our Our house, it has a crowd. There's always something happening, and it's usually quite loud.
Welcome back to the second set of All Things Moore County. Fascinating conversation all about the Malcolm Blue Farm, and my guests all seem very committed to preserving something that is a very important part of Moore County's past. And in between the sets, I was witness to a very interesting conversation about the economic viability of the turpentine industry in the middle 1800s, I think we were talking about. And Bob, I think you were making a comment that this area actually generated more revenue or more barrels.
By 1860, Malcolm Blue was producing over 9,000 barrels annually and being shipped out of the Aberdeen Railroad Station at naval stores and turpentine, which was more than the entire railroad line produced between Charlotte, North Carolina, and Atlanta, Georgia, which is a pine tar area.
Sure.
All right, so this was a major industry down here. So much so that Malcolm Blue's nephew, John, all right, started the Aberdeen and Rockfish Railroad just to move his uncle's trees and supplies and materials to the railroad station.
Interesting.
So, yeah, definitely, there was a lot of activity going on.
So a lot of the people who have moved here recently, when they go by the Blues Crossing Apartments, that is not just a name that came up because it sounded like a good marketing slogan. There was a history to it.
Oh, sure.
And Linda's nodding yes with a big smile. We're going to speak to Brian Avery, who is a novelist or an author. He's written a couple of books on the history
of Averysboro, where his family is from. And the Battle of Averysboro is a famous Civil War battle.
Okay. We're going to give him a call, and he's kind enough, I think, to pull off wherever he is and talk to us and talk to you. And we'll see if he is there. I feel like a game show host.
Wow. I told you this was Phone a Friend.
That's right. That's right. Phone a friend.
Phone a friend.
That's exactly right.
One lifeline call.
Hello?
Yes, Brian. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Brian. I'm Bill Sahadi. We're in the middle of the show All Things Moore County, and I think you and Tom just spoke. And I'm sitting here with Kelly Hinson, Bob Martin, and Linda Jarrett, just talking about the Malcolm Blue Farm and the turpentine industry, and everyone is telling me you are the man to talk to.
I reckon.
You reckon, huh? That's a word Bob Martin and I learned, maybe about 20 years ago when we moved here. We didn't use the word reckon where we're from. Can you tell?
Not really yet. Keep talking.
If I keep just pretend I'm Bob Martin's cousin.
Hey, Brian, how you doing?
How y'all today?
Tell us a little bit about. Give us a historical perspective of the turpentine industry here in Aberdeen and Moore County.
Well, the industry actually started out as tar in 1705 at the coast near Bath. Of course, England passed an act to create a bounty in 1705. They were getting their tar from Sweden, and Sweden kind of got in a little war there, and they had a monopoly on everything. Well, Sir Walter Raleigh had told the Queen that the entire coast of the Carolinas was covered in the type of tree you made pitch from. And tar and pitch were necessary to build the ships. So in 1705, they sent a group of tar makers to the Bath area to get started shipping tar out. And that went on, of course, tar and pitch through the Civil War. And when the Civil War, when the Monitor and the Virginia fought, and they were iron ships, all of a sudden the world's need for tar diminished as the world went to building iron and then steel ships.
Uh-huh.
And so, but lucky for North Carolina, about 1833, everybody was burning whale oil in their lamps, and whales got scarce. We had a first energy crisis. They had to go to a different type burning fluid, they called it. What was invented was called camphene, which was alcohol and turpentine mixed. And that caused the flood of people to start moving into the area up down the rivers. because, of course, at that time we had 96 million acres from Virginia to Texas of longleaf pine.
Right.
And so you could buy land in the swamps for, $2.50, $3, $5 an acre. Up here in South Carolina, it was as low as 25 cents an acre. And so they would purchase land with longleaf pine in the bottoms with one good for farming to, of course, tap the pines and produce turpentine from the living pines,
Wow, fascinating. Did you know David Woodruff, who wrote the book Taproots?
No, I'm afraid that's one I missed.
David was a lifelong resident of Southern Pines. He passed away recently, and he wrote a book called Taproots, all about his growing up in Moore County and what it was like as a child, as a teenager, as a returning student, as a young adult, and used it as a background, the turpentine industry, and how vibrant it was to the well-being of the citizens of Moore County.
Yeah, well, in 1860, 70% of all the tar pitch and turpentine used in the world went down the Cape Fear River.
Wow.
So it was a very strong industry here at one time until we ran through. Basically, when you finished turpentine in a section of woods as much as you could, then all that was left to do was timber. And, of course, they would make timber rafts. They called that ton timber, and take it down the river and sell that as well in Wilmington.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really led to the demise of the longleaf in North Carolina. Then it moved to South Carolina. And then by 1901, it was in Georgia, Alabama, Florida. And the industry was growing down there before they went to a different type of collection system that wouldn't, injure the trees as much.
Mm-hmm.
When it started conservation, and then, it was gone from here by then. So it's set in the very end of the time, around late 1800s, early 1900s, the farmers stopped distilling themselves, and what was left of the pine woods, they would actually collect the resin and take it down to a neighborhood still, and you sold it just like you did tobacco or cotton or whatever. It was your cash crop, and so to say, and then you had a big still in town that distilled, thousands of gallons, a year. So that switched though after between the Civil War and the late 1800s. It was the heyday around here.
Wow.
Brian, it's Kelly. I wanted to ask you about the orchards and how many trees had to be worked to produce a barrel and that sort of thing. In 1860, our fellow over here, Malcolm Blue, was producing 9,000 barrels a year. Is that a pretty good amount?
Well, all I can tell you is it took the resin from about 280 boxes, which I guess you know what a box is, the hole that they cut in the base of the tree to catch the resin. Average 280 of those to fill up a 32-gallon barrel, and you had 7, 9, and 11 barrel steels. So you can multiply 7, 9, or 11 times 280. That's how many trees had to be worked to run the steel one time. And out of a 32-gallon barrel of resin, you would get about 8 gallons of turpentine, 7 to 8 gallons after it was distilled. And then, of course, probably 3/4 of the resin was remaining in rosin that's poured out of the steel.
Pretty dramatic word picture.
It wasn't very easy work.
Very, very hard work. I mean, it was a 12-hour day, and in 1901, the average man worked for about $1 a day.
Oh.
1901, and he, if he were cutting boxes, he had to cut boxes for 1.5 cents per box. So that's how much work he had to cut. I mean, he had to cut to make his $1 a day. Around 100 boxes a day in the wintertime. Oh, you know, and it was, they were, you know, the average farm was 10,500 trees. That was the average farm, or excuse me, 10,500 boxes. Now, they may work 3 or 4 farms a year, but, you know, was what we call a farm would have been about 10,500 boxes.
And at times they would have boxed the tree on all 4 sides.
Well, you boxed it 6 inches apart. You get a box, and you know, as long as you move 6, 8 inches away, you box it again, the tree would live. You had to leave 6 or 8 inches of space in there between them so that the water, you know, could go up to the limbs, the sap.
Now, I want to remind you, I know you came down last year over to Malcolm Blue Farm and you boxed a tree for us there. And it turned out to be a dry tree. But we're going to be looking at that tree when you come on the 30th to do your demonstration. Just you guys could go ahead and scrape it again just for demonstration purposes, but it's still dry. It has no resin.
Yeah, when you're boxing a tree to make turpentine, what we found is you need a mid-aged tree, and it needs to be the most healthy tree. A tree that's not healthy on one side or the other has got a maybe run by lightning or been hit by something or whatever. It upsets the system in the tree, and even some of the nicest trees don't do as much as the others. So it was a hit and miss thing. And even reading in the 1850s, back then when they were teaching people, they told them some of them will do well, some of them won't do anything, and you know, but if there's a little bit in the box, get it out, because like one pea, you don't, if you get a pea to shell and it's got one in it, you still shell it, you know, it adds to the barrel, but that's the way they taught back then, but that's pretty much the way it went. It was a stroke of luck. Even whether the trees were on a hill or in a bottom, actually the trees up on the hillside produce more than the ones in the bottoms, in the wet spots, which you wouldn't think that would be so.
That's right.
Brian,
it does.
What you're saying is it's fascinating. What the Malcolm Blue Farm is trying to do? Why is that so important?
Well, what we found in about 3 years of doing this show is that even though we're a Tar Heel state, most people know absolutely nothing about how this industry was worked. Even the ones whose grandmothers, grandfathers did it for a living,
right?
They heard them talk about it,
right?
But by the time most people that are alive now have never actually seen it,
right?
And so we set out to study. I read 9 books and start working on another one right now, several times. And what we did was go out, and I had some land and I had some trees, and I said, well, it ain't but one way to learn it, figure out what they're talking about. And so we set out to actually learn the process and just using what they were, you know, the directions they left in the history books, and
right.
And purchased all the tools and you know, invented a couple things and worked it around to where we could actually put on a 45-minute presentation that usually leaves most people knowing already about what they're talking about when they leave. It's something I've found has been super confusing. Most people tar and pitch and turpentine all mixed up, and that, you know, even if you're looking for a tool that's a turpentine tool, a lot of times they've got it listed as a tar tool. it's just been really exciting to see people's face light up when oh, that's what they did, you know. And when you actually do it and perform the work, and they can see it, it all makes sense to them then, you know.
Right. And I remember when I first saw you guys doing this and heard your talk, it occurred to me then that all these tools that I had that were my great-grandfather's were turpentine tools and tar tools, and I had no idea what I had before you showed me.
Yeah, that's common throughout North Carolina. And most people think we're called Tar Heels because of a basketball team.
That's what we said at the
right.
beginning of the show. Uh-huh.
It goes back to where the men were working around the tar mounds, and you watch those tar mounds for 9 days, 24 hours a day. And, of course, you had to work around them and dip out the tar, and men are bad for spilling stuff anyway.
And a lot of other things.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian, people can come and see you actually next week at the Tar Pitch and Turpentine event on the 30th of April from 10 to 2. That's what I understand.
Yes, sir. We'll have the whole crowd there, I reckon. And we'll be doing the same show we've done all over Eastern North Carolina now. And it takes we do the show about once an hour.
Right.
Or a little more. Depends on how long it takes to gather a crowd at. And
right.
then it lasts about 40, 45 minutes. And we start with 1705 and wind up in 1950. And tell the entire story.
Okay.
Why it started, how it started, where, and we use the original tools. We don't hang them up on a shelf. We use them, and
fascinating.
the entire thing, just like their granddaddies did, you know.
We thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and bringing this to life. And I hope, as a result, we get a lot of families, especially a lot of kids. It's a great way to preserve history and to keep it alive.
Well, and one added surprise is that, you know, my dialect is actually the dialect of the guys who did this, because that's the people that raised me. So
You're very authentic.
Shows, they get it in their original dialect.
Yeah. Well, you could win an Oscar. You're very good.
Oh, well, it's not a game, man. It's the real thing.
I believe you. Brian Avery, thank you so much for joining us.
Godspeed, y'all. I'll see you next weekend.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. We'll see you then, Brian.
So long, Brian.
We'll return to the final set in just a minute. This is All Things Moore County.
In the middle of our street, our house. In the middle of our house, it has a crown. Our mum, she's so house proud. Nothing ever slows her down, and a mess is not allowed.
It was a remedy for
Medicinal.
everything.
Yeah, it was medicinal use.
And truly, it probably was.
In some cases.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Yeah.
For?
All kinds of things. But back then,
Parasites, stomach
they
parasites.
dose you with anything anyway.
People
If
used
it
to
didn't kill you,
swallow
it'd
it.
cure
They used
you.
to eat it,
Did
swallow
you?
it. You know,
No
a teaspoon
kidding.
of turpentine.
See all this stuff? Yeah.
And if you
People
ever
don't know.
smell the turpentine that they make, it's nothing like compressed turpentine that you buy in the
Right.
store. It's
The
absolutely
industrial
nothing
solvents.
like it.
Uh-huh.
And the products that come out at the end of the day after they're done working
Yeah.
are amazing to me, because all of my ancestors worked tar and turpentine. Even if their real job was farming or blacksmith or whatever, they always had this on the side going, because the pine tree was, here, and they used it. if it was here, they used it.
Yeah, most
So-
people come here and they talk about this area, as a land of the pines, but there's no correlation between what the pines meant.
It's not
that-
just pretty.
It's not just pretty.
That's right.
But that's what. But today, I mean, we get so far away from where it all came from, the
Well,
origins.
that is one of the prime purposes of the farm, so people know if they're from here, where they came from. If they're not from here, they still should have an understanding of what's in our history,
And
our
really,
collective
that's why
history.
they tied in so well with the Malcolm Blue Farm, was because Malcolm Blue was farming turpentine and tar. This was naval stores
Right.
territory.
Right.
And we're very fortunate here in Moore County to still have longleaf pine trees. It's
Yeah.
like in Harnett, they're a scarcity.
Yeah, we are back in the third set of All Things Moore County. He's a fascinating. Brian was fascinating to speak to. He just brought everything to life as if it were real today.
He's a flavorful character.
Oh yeah, and he'll be taking part in. He'll be boxing a tree, and Tom, I guess he will be with you performing the reenactments.
Well, I'll be helping actually make the tar and make the turpentine. Brian does most of the talking for the demonstrations. He's
Really? What a
he's the
surprise!
historian.
What a shock! I can't get over that. He seems so shy.
And the rest of the Tar Heel boys actually do the demonstrations of the actual tar making.
It's like
while
Martha
they
and the
talk.
Vandellas, huh?
Yeah.
You're one of the Vandellas?
You got
Okay.
it.
Or the Supremes or
We
whatever.
might get him to dance.
Uh-huh. The town of Aberdeen, let's talk about that for just a minute, because the town has a tremendous amount of historic significance. People go downtown and they think, oh, these are cool buildings and it all looks good. But, Bob, they don't see how vibrant the railroad industry was here and the turpentine.
Downtown Aberdeen at one point had 4 different railroads running out of it.
Yeah.
We're down to 3 nowadays. We have CSX, of course, the
Yeah.
Aberdeen, Carolina, and Western, and Malcolm Blue's nephew's railroad, the Aberdeen and Rockfish.
Right.
A lot of activity still happens in town. A lot of car switching. We put new scales in. It's
Yeah. Keep talking. We'll just ignore it.
so there's a lot of cars being switched around and moved. All right, we have
Right.
our little railroad museum, which is basically a 3-room schoolhouse, but it's a nice place. Kelly, earlier we were talking about newspapers. I've got all the old copies of the Citizen in the Railroad Museum.
Wow.
The original books, and they date back to the 1830s, and it's interesting reading. It's just something you should come over and see one day.
Would love to.
All right. The Aberdeen and Rockfish Railroad has one building in the back that I recently had the honor of touring, built in 1888. It has all the equipment operating, working, needed to repair a steam locomotive.
Uh-huh.
And they want to throw it away.
No, we can't do that.
All right, because it's just in the way. You cannot use the equipment anymore because it's not OSHA certified.
And that's part of the problem, I think, with society today. We're the throwaway culture, and we need to preserve our history. And just because it's not OSHA certified doesn't mean that we don't want to be able to see it and learn from it.
Right.
It's just like the tar and turpentine. Once people stopped doing it, it died.
Yeah.
And nobody knew how to do it anymore.
Bob, is there any initiative in the works to preserve that equipment?
Yeah, the director of operations for the A&R, Daniel Hill, is working very hard with the management to try and save that equipment. Save it by, I talked to him and I says, donate it to a museum. It's a tax write-off. I mean, just
Right.
don't sell it for scrap,
Definitely.
which is what the plan was.
Right.
It was
Well, the
terrifying.
railroad coming to what was then Blues Crossing is why Aberdeen and in turn the neighboring resort towns of Southern Pines and Pinehurst are here today.
Right, exactly. It's important to preserve, and it's important for people to understand. Otherwise, people will get lost in the new shopping centers, the big box retailers, the fast food world we live in, the internet. But this area, we said at the beginning of the show, the reason people come here, they're drawn to the history, they're drawn to the character, and it reminds them of a time gone by. And that, I guess, Bob, I have to ask you, coming from Brooklyn, what is it about you that has such a
Well-
strong passion to preserve an area that you're not originally from?
I moved away from Brooklyn at a young age. I moved 60 miles east to a small town on Long Island. It was a fishing village.
Yeah.
And we repaired fishing nets and crabbed and clammed. And the whole village was filled with these little cottages that the farmers owned and the fishermen owned. Little fishermen's cottages, they called. They were basically 20 by 20 buildings. That's all they were.
Uh-huh.
And they were along the ocean. Nobody wanted to live there years ago because it was all cattail and swamps. Well, nowadays, that's ocean view property.
Right.
They're spending $300,000 to buy 1 acre of land with this old 1850s house on it. They bulldoze it down, and they're putting up McMansions. So all the history, and there were some preserves in the area, some old buildings, one by one, they were
Yeah.
knocked down and gone. Went back up north recently, and I didn't recognize my hometown. And I said, I can't let that happen here.
That's
Right.
This is
sad.
such a beautiful place that it's so well kept by our predecessors. We need to save it.
Mm-hmm.
We need to preserve the knowledge, and I've learned a lot. All right. Fortunately, I had some poultry background, some animal husbandry background, so I became useful at the farm.
Right.
Plus, I was free labor, but.
Put it to work. Get to work.
And with my construction background, I was able to salvage quite a bit of it. I even picked up recently railroad jacks, one handling 22 tons, one handling 15 tons, just so at some point we can jack up those buildings and rebuild them.
Yeah.
I'm good to go on that.
Yeah, our foundations need work.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's
Linda?
a bigger picture to preservation even than the important one that Bob has just verbally drawn. Our kids don't have any idea of what their history really is. It's not being a main course in school anymore. And it does relate to what systems our people lived under at that time, which ties back into our forefathers and why our country even began. The number of children today who have any understanding of that or any understanding of how their government is supposed to work. So if you start with the easy or attractive things, you can build from there and make those connections and hopefully make up for some of the gaps in education that exist today. And I think that's an important ultimate role that the farm can help with.
You sound like a dedicated teacher.
Well, I come from teachers and farmers.
I'm not surprised. We're unfortunately winding down and running out of time. But Kelly, do you want something?
I do. I want to make sure that anyone who wants to become involved out at Malcolm Blue Farm, they can join the Friends of Malcolm Blue Farm, which is our new organization, and they can help in any way that they see a need. That might be a financial donation. It might be a skill that they have. We welcome volunteers, and just notify us, and we'll get back with you.
Who
We'll
would they
be happy to
contact?
have volunteers at the museum, and they can learn on the job from Bob, who knows everything.
He does. He's
So-
from New York.
Wait a minute now.
He knows. Everyone from New York knows everything.
They think they do.
They think they do, but they say it in such a convincing way. Give me a contact number if
Well,
somebody
the-
wants
yeah,
to make a phone call.
We gave 2 contact numbers on a recent handout for the Moore
Okay.
County Leadership Institute that did Bob took on a tour.
Right.
One is my cell phone, which is 724-1159.
Right.
Linda Jarrett, and then one is for Dean Moon, who is a past president and also one of the prime movers in our Friends group, and her cell phone is 692-0092.
Okay. And people can go on Facebook, and they can just type in Malcolm Blue Farm.
On the Parks and Rec Department for Aberdeen,
Okay.
that's where everything will be handled for now.
Okay.
We are in the process of having the original website redesigned and revamped and put back into place, but it's not there yet.
Okay. The event is next Saturday, April the 30th, from 10 to 2 at the Malcolm Blue Farm on Bethesda Road, and it will be a great opportunity for people to reacquaint themselves with the origins of Moore County and a history long gone by, but you all have made a very compelling case as to why it should be preserved, and I think you all did a great job. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, Kelly, thank you. Tom,
Thank you.
thank you. Linda Jarrett.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, and Bob Martin.
Thank you for having us.
Stay a Southerner.
Yes.
It was a
I tell you,
pleasure.
he got here as soon as he could.
He did. He did. Everybody have a great week. Thank you.
You too.
Quiet now. Our mum, she's so house proud. Nothing ever slows her down.